Okay, hot take. If you work in ER, you are either traumatized or you're in denial. And if that statement pisses you off, guess which one you are?
I like that. That's good.
Hello, and welcome to the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast. This is where we share stories for inspiration, entertainment, and encouragement, because we all know emergency nurses have the best stories. Now here's your host, Kevin McFarland.
Hey everybody, Kevin McFarland here from the Art of Emergency Nursing, and thank you for taking time to listen to this episode. I really appreciate it. If you have not yet left a rating and review, please do so. Leave a rating and review in iTunes or Spotify. Spotify, now you can leave a rating and review. So if you listen to this podcast in Spotify, that's a great place to go ahead and leave a review. Please leave a 5-star rating and a review. It really helps boost up the show and helps people like you find a podcast like this. Now, one of the best things you can do for the podcast, in addition to leaving a rating and review, is for you to share this podcast with your friends. Share this with other ER nurses and people who would be interested in hearing this content. That goes a really long way to getting the podcast out to new people. My guest today has been struggling a little bit with everything that's going on with COVID and everything that's going on with the world. She's had a little bit of a tough time, and I thought it would be an important lesson to share because my guess is some of you may very well be in the same boat. So I wanted you to hear from somebody who can let you know that it is okay to not be okay, and it is okay to ask for help if that's what you need. My guest today is a frontline RN and a nurse entrepreneur. You may know her as the Best Coast RN CEO and founder. She designs amazing gear for nurses, and she just started a thing called the Best Coast Break Room, where she is allowing folks to get together and talk and process and just kind of be there and have some fellowship with one another. You can find that on her website, Best Coast RN, and I'll also leave a link in the show notes so you can just click on it. You are going to really enjoy this episode with my friend, Ginelle.
So, my name is Ginelle Roche. I am an ED nurse. I have been a nurse for about 13 years. I started my career in cardiac cath lab for about 2 years, but came out of nursing school knowing that ED was going to be my thing. So as soon as I found an opportunity to join an emergency department, I seized it immediately and have never looked back. So I am also in my spare time founder and CEO of my very own little company called Best Coast RN.
We're in the gear right now.
And all kinds of fun stuff. So that's my other little creative outlet.
So what made you decide to be a nurse?
Oh, this is kind of funny, actually. So I didn't really decide immediately to be a nurse. I should have decided immediately to be a nurse because as a kid, I used to run around with like a little fanny pack full of first aid supplies. And like, if we went on hikes and stuff as a family, someone would trip and get hurt. I'd say, I got it, to the rescue. So that was the kind of kid I was. And then somehow I went to college for the first time and decided I wanted to do linguistics and language studies. So I studied Spanish and Italian, and I got really into linguistics and got my BA from UC Santa Cruz. And the upshot of that is I speak Spanish fluently, which helps much in my job now.
Super helpful in the ER.
It's very helpful. It did not launch a great career in anything that I wanted to do. So I had to do a little soul searching after I graduated college the first time and discussed a lot with family and friends. And my mom has been a nurse for, I think, since 1977.
Holy cow.
So she, since the dawn of cardiac cath labs, she's been there. She can tell you some really cool stories about that. So she said, I don't know why you don't go into nursing. You'll never be unemployed. You'll make good money. You like people. You should do it. And I said, you're probably right, Mom, because moms are generally right.
They usually are.
So I did. And I did a second bachelor's program that was accelerated, and I had to leave the state to do it because I wanted to do it as quickly as possible. So I moved to New York City, and did my bachelor's in nursing in New York City very quickly, and came back to California and started working.
How quick was the program?
It was 2 years, included my prerequisites.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Nice. But going from California to New York, do you have family or friends in New York?
I did not. I know. I was looking for a program that was going to start as soon as possible and that would take me right away, because California was so impacted at that time that I was going to be on a waiting list potentially for years before I was able to start a career. So my radius got bigger and bigger. First I was looking Oregon, Nevada, whatever. Well, all those states were impacted too. And so as my radius got larger and larger, my ultimate choices ended up being in Omaha, Nebraska, or New York. So
okay, probably a pretty good call, I'm guessing. I mean, nothing against Nebraska, but
I did consider Omaha because I thought, okay, it's closer to home. Maybe I can fly home more easily. But it turns out there is no easy flight path to Omaha from here. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, so there is no easy way to get there from here. And this was in the days of like JetBlue and that kind of stuff. So going back and forth to New York was easy and cheap.
Nice. Holy cow.
I did that.
So packed up, moved to New York. Did you know anyone there in New York, or any friend? You said no family, no friends.
Nobody, not a soul.
Holy cow.
I made some wonderful friends in New York in nursing school. They were fantastic people. We ended up being roommates my second year there. We're still friends today. We went to each other's weddings and follow each other's kids, and I miss them so much.
It's kind of funny.
On the East Coast still, yeah.
I find nursing school makes great friends, right? Like you end up really being tight with your nursing school compadres. I know I was. There's a few folks I was really tight with that I was like, man, like it's like going through boot camp together. Like,
yeah. So yeah, through adversity and trauma, you bond, right? Which I think is similar for our ER families.
It's true. So. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So holy cow. So finished up nursing school, then headed back to California and looked for a job, huh?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Why ER?
I just knew that for me, the pace and the constant change was good for me. I just knew that was going to be a good fit. I'm that person who like throws myself into learning something like all the way. And then once I've learned it, I'm like, cool, next. Like I have in my closet right now, a giant box full of knitting stuff, for example. I learned how to knit. I didn't just knit scarves. Okay. I knit sweaters. I knit hats. Like I learned it all the way and I no longer knit. So I'm just that kind of person. And so to me, if I had, jumped into like CVICU, I would have been like, okay, I know this stuff now. Bored. Gotta go.
Bored, done. Time to go.
Cool. Mm-hmm. And it was highlighted for me with my first job too, right? So I went into cardiac cath lab, was very bored doing the same procedures over and over again, and found my ER job. And like I said, never looked back. I love it so much.
It's kind of funny. Some people I think find a lot of comfort in that. Like you always know what the day's going to look like. You always know like each procedure. And granted, there's variety and of course everything, but for the most part, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how it's going to go. There's some variety, but for the most part, it's pretty like, okay, we have X number of cases today. This is the cases we're going to do. We might have someone show up who's a STEMI that shows up at the front door. We'll get them too. But for the most part, it's kind of routine, I think. So that's certainly that is not the ER, right? The ER is never routine it's just always, you never know what you're going to get. So.
Yeah. So that's what attracted me, was just constantly, there's always going to be something new for me to learn. There's always going to be something different to do. I'm running from one thing to the next.
Yep.
And that's just kind of how my brain works. That's how my life is. If you know me, I'm a little into everything, kind of all over the place.
Gotcha. Yeah, me too.
I just knew it would be the fit for me. And I like adrenaline a little bit too. So
yeah, that's kind of a must with ER. Like you gotta be like ready to handle anything, like always ready to go. One of the things that I found when I started in the ER and grew up in the ER. So until my first job, when I was one of my first jobs out of the ER as a nurse, was a house supervisor position. And I realized the more global picture of, the whole house. And I learned a tremendous amount of respect for the med-surg nurses, because we had some, I worked for a really small hospital where there were 2 docs there overnight, maybe 3 if there was an OB case going, but there was an ER doc who was looking after the ER. There was an OB doc who was maybe plus or minus there, and there was an anesthesiologist there in case OB needed them. And that was it. Like 2 docs, most times 2 docs in the hospital, sometimes 3. Anyone else, if you wanted somebody in the middle of the night, you had to call, wake them up and get them down there. So the times that we had to call like the ICU and say, hey, ICU doc, I need you to come down here and intubate your patient, or not intubate the patient because the ER docs would do that. But, I need you to come down here and manage your very sick ICU patient. It was a matter of calling somebody up and waking them up out of bed and saying, hey, we need you to come down. And usually mine was the second call after the nurse called and made that suggestion, and they politely or not so politely declined. And then we called back and said, no, sorry, I don't realize that this was less of a request and more of a come on down. But one of the things I learned that the nurses, the med-surg nurses, had a lot more autonomy than I expected in that small little hospital, and really knew their stuff. I mean, we had some fantastic nurses that worked for us, and they just handled everything. They just handled whatever needed to be handled. And, they would take care of things. New patient would come in, they'd get all the orders in. They call the doc, say, hey, here's what I'm ordering. Do you have anything you want to add? And they'd say, no, sounds good. Looks like you got it all. So they're like, okay, we'll sign that order. And they're like, okay, thanks. But they were good folks. So I learned a whole new respect for them that I maybe didn't have as completely before. So, one of the things I want to particularly talk about with you, and it's a conversation we've talked a little bit on Facebook, and I know you've posted some stuff on Facebook about this, is talking a little bit about COVID-19, because COVID-19 has been tough for ER nurses. Holy cow. Doesn't it feel like it's been like, we're coming up on what? I don't even know how many months now. And it feels like it's been going on for 10 years. In some ways it feels like it's been going on forever. And then in other ways, it feels like it's just starting. So I'm curious your thoughts on how things are going in your neck of the woods, as far as COVID, and how you're coping, and what kind of strategies have you used to try to make sure you're taken care of, and everything that comes with it. I mean, there's a lot of emotions that are tied around COVID for nurses, and sometimes, gosh, y'all, it's hard right now. It's hard time to be a nurse sometimes.
It's so hard. And that's kind of, I think, lately been a lot of what I've been talking about in my life and on social media, because it's kind of, I feel the only way to help others through this is to share and let other people know we're going through the same things.
Yeah.
So when I started, when COVID started, I think everybody had the same fear. We all had, our PPE challenges. We didn't even know what we were going to wear, right? Then we knew what we were going to wear. And then it was like, we don't have enough of what we're going to wear, ration what we're going to wear. Our staff's getting sick. I mean, it was like the world blew up, and it was hard and scary. And I just assumed we were all going to have COVID and hopefully survive it and then come back to work so we could keep fighting against it, right?
Right.
But it's just, and like you said, when we were speaking earlier, you felt like, okay, this will be a few months, maybe. How long are we going to do this, right? And it went on and on and on. And really just, we shut the planet down, right? So,
we shut everything down, and yet still there's just now news today of this next variant that is getting legs and starting to spread a little bit. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah. And so for me, I think at first I felt like everyone else did. And I don't think it was necessarily anything worse than I'd experienced before, meaning as kind of trauma experiences in the ER. I didn't feel heavy to me until it wore on and on and on.
Yeah.
And by last winter, sometime in the middle of last winter, I thought, okay, I have to do something, because I just felt like checked out of my life, exhausted. I felt like all I was doing was sleeping, and that everything I was doing was a half-ass. Like, I just felt I was being a very poor mother, a very poor spouse, a very poor anything to anybody. I mean, a terrible friend. I felt like all I was doing was working and sleeping.
Yeah.
And I barely had enough energy to work. And so then at home, we talked about fight, flight, or freeze, right? All this anxiety, all these feelings building up for me. I basically froze. I would come home and just check out. I would come home and, we're not cleaning. We're not doing anything that's supposed to get done. We're like playing games on our phone or watching TV or whatever, ignoring my children and I think it just felt like I was doing nothing well. And I had all these responsibilities that I couldn't fulfill. So I decided that I would reach out to EAP. I think most employers have EAP programs. If you don't, it's an employee assistance program. A lot of them offer free therapy up to as many sessions, depending on where you work.
Depending on where you work. I know for our facility where I'm at now, you get 5 free sessions. And then from there, if you need to continue, then they get you resources so you can continue. But what an amazing option for folks who need it.
Yeah. So that was the first thing I did last winter. And those sessions helped me, and I felt better, and I felt like I could keep going. So, and then I came back to my spouse and I said, okay, I went through all of this stuff. I feel like I was, doing X, Y, and Z poorly. And I was not, I said, how did that affect you? Like, how do you feel about that time? And he said, no, I didn't really notice.
We're guys, we're not super observant, right? Like, okay, just, for his, like, I feel like maybe him and I could be friends, because I'm sometimes not super observant either. So
it's like, I don't know whether to be upset about that or relieved, but a little of both, I think.
So that begs the question, were you just hiding it well, or was he just not, I was going to say, is he just not super, was he a little clueless? And I say that with love, because as a guy, I'm sometimes a little clueless. So I say that with no judgment. But sometimes guys are a little clueless, or sometimes, they got stuff going on too that they're dealing with. So
absolutely. And he's a 7th grade teacher. So he's dealing with all of that stuff, right?
His world got turned upside down as well then.
Exactly. So I think between the two of us having jobs that were turned upside down and being kind of having this, I don't want to say normal, but this level of stress that was shared between us that was expected. I don't think that, and combine that with, I'm an ER nurse. I can box stuff up and put it away like nobody else, right? I'm really good at that. We all are.
Yeah, we're really good at kind of backing something up, compartmentalizing it, and saying, we'll deal with that later.
Keep on trucking, right? Deal with that later. One foot in front of the other, which I think, so combined with that, and that he's a guy and not as in tune probably with my emotions, I think all of those things combined made it so that he wasn't really in tune with that. And honestly, when I heard that, like I said, I was a little upset, but I was like, thank God. Because I felt like I was ruining my kids, ruining my marriage, So I really felt that things were crumbling around me because I couldn't take all of it. So after that therapy, that was better. That was better. It was great. So, okay, on to 2021. And we're very optimistic that this is going to go away and we're going to, COVID's going to get better. And it doesn't, and it doesn't, and then it does. And then we have vaccines at the end of the year of 2020. And then we, coming into 2021. And so things are looking a little bit up. I mean, I cried. I don't know about you, but when I found out I could schedule my vaccine. I mean, I cried like a little baby. I was so relieved.
I remember seeing you post it. And you did a little video and you were like tears of joy as you were getting vaccinated. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, that's what people need to see, because that just shows how much this means to her and how much this
getting
means
tears
to
thinking about it right now, because I had so much fear that I was going to make my family sick.
That's the hardest part, right?
I know it. I know you experienced it. I mean, I know we all did.
Yeah.
We all do. But,
Yeah.
you have a special case, but I have kids. I have my husband. I didn't want anyone to get sick. So for me, it was just such relief.
Yeah.
And so gosh, so we had our vaccines and things were going to look up and they didn't for quite a while.
Yeah.
And then we got to summer, and summer was kind of nice. We kind of opened some things up. I think we expected a little bit of a surge after things opened. We had a great summer. We camped a lot of camping. We like to camp in my family anyway, and that's a very easy socially distanced activity to do.
Yeah, it's perfect.
But we actually were able,
pandemic.
Yeah, we were able to travel to Hawaii, which I would have never done without feeling very safe about it, because I knew everyone was getting tested and vaccinated and all those things. And then toward the end of the summer, I think I was off work for about almost 2 weeks, and we had gone camping and came back, and I got to work and it looked like the beginning of the pandemic all over again.
Man.
And I lost it.
Yeah.
For lack of a better, I didn't cry in that moment, but I came back in and just felt like I hit a brick wall and said, okay, I'm being triggered. And I've never felt this way before, but I am feeling exactly like I felt last winter when I needed all that therapy. And I am, a little panicky and a little short of breath and a little angry, and so many kind of negative emotions were just overwhelming, just taking over me.
Yeah. And it's easy for it to happen because it's so overwhelming. There's just so much going on that it was impossible to impossible to think that we weren't going to feel it.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, this is bad. This is bad. So I went through a few more shifts and I was like, okay, no, this is really bad. When I say triggered, I am triggered, and I don't know what this is, but I have to do something. So I got a therapist through my health insurance, someone I could see on a regular basis. I went over, we did EAP already. So let's just get
past that. That.
Yes.
Got
Now
those 5 free or whatever, and you still need more, then you gotta take the next step.
Yes. So I did that. And the first session we had, she said, you have PTSD. And I said, well, maybe, I whatever. It's, I got a hard job and, this is hard for everybody. And, she goes, no, I am telling you that you have PTSD. Okay. So that was a big, I would have never labeled that on myself. I don't think I would have even considered it. I knew I was having a very hard time. But she named it. So that's what it was. And we continued and went through and did a depression scale and an anxiety scale. And I was not off the charts, but I was high. High. And she said, I'm not telling you what to do. I am not the doctor. I don't prescribe medications, but most people who score this high on this test do need medication, or maybe should really consider it. And I had kind of already broached that subject with my primary doctor. She basically told me, if and when you're ready, let me know. I said I wanted to start therapy and see how that went. I did not expect to walk into my first session and decide that that's what I needed to do. But after her kind of just, here's all the information. She said, here's all the information. You have PTSD, you have this, you have that. Medication might be an option for you. I said, okay, let's do it. Because I just didn't want to feel that way anymore.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think a lot of nurses I know ended up on meds for the first time, and a variety of meds. So I know people who, were having anxiety for the first time ever, or first time in a long time, or people who, a friend who was recently diagnosed with ADHD. That probably has always been a thing. I've always thought he was ADHD. I just assumed he was on meds and had no idea he wasn't. And then found out that he got to the point where it's like, okay, right now, kind of need it. Like, there's a lot of people that had a lot of needs. I think for a lot of people, it triggered as kind of a buzzword, but I think for a lot of people, this triggered a lot of emotion. Because it's an emotional time. And if it's emotional time for anybody in the planet, like everyone on the planet's dealing with the same thing. But for emergency nurses, it's that next level up, because we are in the shit of it. And we're the ones who are getting our teeth kicked in and day out, with people who are, needed care.
Mm-hmm. So, and I had never had physical manifestations of anxiety in my life. And I started having that shortness of breath and the palpitations, and just feeling my heart rate never actually went up, but you just feel kind of fluttery in your chest.
Yeah.
I finally went, oh, I think I understand my patients' panic attacks now. A little bit.
Yeah.
So I had to start some medication. Not had to, I chose to start some medication to help with the depression and anxiety. And it has been a game changer. So
good for you.
Yeah. That combined with the therapy, it takes a while for your medications to kind of kick in and even you out.
Yeah.
So there was just so much going on. That's a small piece. The COVID blowing up. I had, my aunt was very ill and ended up passing away, but this was prior to, and I knew it was coming. We had to put her on hospice, and there was so much. I lost a coworker suddenly and very tragically, super young for no reason.
Yeah.
So it was a culmination of the things. I think regardless of the people we lost, I think I would have started medication anyway, just because of the way COVID was going for me. So it's been an immense help. The therapy's been an immense help. The medications are tremendously hopeful. And the more that I share about it, the more my nurses come forward and say, me too. Yep. So
yeah.
I have a text group that's kind of from my very first ER job. It's all these fabulous ER nurses. We all kind of just grew up in this ER together. It's a really urban ER. It's a really hard place to work. It's one of those places where you don't stay because you like it. You stay because you like the people. It's a hard job. It's Amen. A hard job. That place is a hard place to work.
Yeah.
So we all came up there, and I have this text group of us, and we are, constantly back and forth, checking in with each other, tell each other funny things, stupid things, whatever, stuff about our kids. But when this all kind of came to a head for me, it's kind of just sent out a little text saying, hey, how are you guys doing? Like, are you okay? Because I'm not okay. And it was immediately like, oh, nope, I'm going on stress leave. Nope, I'm, increasing my meds. Just saw my therapist yesterday. I'm, extending my stress leave. These are people who you would be so lucky to work with.
Yeah.
They're the smartest, strongest nurses I've ever worked with, and they're falling apart.
Yep.
We're all falling apart.
It's a lot of nurses right now. A lot of nurses
and
in that boat. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So, one, I'm so glad that you had a support group of folks who you could trust and who you can talk to and be like, hey guys, I'm not okay. How about the rest of y'all? And it just usually takes just one person to say that. And one's like, oh yeah, me too. Hot mess. Yep. Me too. And oftentimes that opens the floodgates of just saying, hey, you know what? It's okay to not be okay, because this sucks. And we're all feeling it. And ER nurses, more than I think anyone, were feeling the pressure of COVID. And it's scary because, it was one of the things that I think that made it very challenging is like, we didn't necessarily know what we were dealing with 100%. And, I don't know how many times you have patients who come in and you're like, oh, you're here for a broken arm. Oh, and you have COVID. Oh, and okay. All right. you're sitting there going, great. I've been, not as diligent with the mask as maybe I should be. And it was a tough time. So I think it takes a lot of guts to be the one to step forward and say, one, I need help. And then two, reach out to your peer group and be like, how y'all doing? It takes a lot of guts. So I applaud you for that. Holy cow.
Thank you. I am obviously a person who likes to talk things out. You see me blasting myself on Facebook. I don't get embarrassed in general any longer. So talking to people is my thing. I know for some people that's not your thing, but even if that isn't your thing, I still think therapy is super important and super helpful for everyone.
Yeah.
I have this, hot take. If you work in ER, you are either traumatized or you're in denial. And if that statement pisses you off, guess which one you are?
I like that. That's good. That's good.
I mean, we have a hard job anyway. There's trauma every day. There's stuff that we see that should traumatize us.
Yeah.
Every day.
Every day.
And then you add COVID on top of that, and all this fear and anxiety about something we can't even see, right? An enemy we can't see. And where does that put us?
Yeah, an enemy that we can't necessarily see and sometimes don't recognize. Sometimes we're like, oh, and you have COVID. Oh, okay.
A little broken toe and, you have a fever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you didn't come in here for that.
Exactly.
Yeah. I remember so many of those scares too at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah. And then for nurses with families, you had to go home to their families, go to their loved ones, go home to their kids. I mean, think of how many nurses last year were staying in hotels. And, there's amazing hotels that stepped up and said, hey, stay here for free. We got you. We appreciate what you're doing. We got you. And the thought that you had to, talk to a nurse, sometime last year who spent probably 6 weeks away from her family, just, trying to avoid them because she didn't know what exactly was going on. So, and you imagine like if anything's going to cause a stress response, not having the people you love there for you and readily available to you that's a huge stressor.
Terrifying, right? Terrifying.
And everybody's world changed, not just yours. Your husband's world changed. Yeah, he's a school teacher. He was suddenly learning to teach on Zoom, which is hard.
I mean, this is global. It's like I keep saying, this is everybody. Literally, everyone was traumatized by this. The planet Earth was traumatized by this, right? I mean, everyone was affected by this in some way. I mean, I even felt guilty for feeling. I feel guilty for my trauma because I didn't lose my job. I didn't have to worry about paying my bills, right? I didn't have to worry about putting food on the table. I still got to work.
Yep. And there's a lot of people that didn't.
Right.
So, yeah.
But then what was our cost, right? The cost was potentially, I mean, some of us lost our lives, right? I mean, that ultimately.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. For one way or another. Which is a little overwhelming. Like it's a little like you see that and you're like, man, holy cow. This is big. It's heavy. So
I could cry thinking about it. I could cry anytime now. Very happy to do so.
I'm a sympathetic crier. If you start, I'll start. So don't. I'd rather you didn't. But But you're right. I mean, it's emotionally, it's a tough place to be in right now. It's a tough time to be a nurse. And I think that there's a lot of things that, and one of the things that I found hard was, here's a community when, communities when COVID was really kind of, peaking and getting started, these communities were coming together and they're banging pots for nurses and they're, honking their horns and yelling and this at shift change or whatever. And, nurses are heroes and you've seen that all over the place. And while all that stuff was cool, at the same time, they still weren't wearing masks. They still weren't protecting themselves. They were still vaccine hesitant or vaccine resistant. And many still are. And, and that's hard too. That's hard too, to be like, guys, we know the answer. We know what we need to do. We just got to get you to do it.
It was
that's
hard for me that that hero stuff.
Yeah.
I just,
and it is for a lot of nurses, because we're not heroes. We have this job. This is our job. We take care of people. That's who we are. It's what we do. And now is a particularly tough time to do that. So,
I always kind of bristled at that. I don't take that hero thing. I think, well, part of it is, you're right. You're exactly right. It's our job. This is what we do.
Yeah. We
do it every day. It's not that much different now, except I have to wear more stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It was Ebola before that. And it was, SARS and MERS before that. And we do this all the time. This is not like we aren't suddenly heroic. And that's kind of what it felt like. So it was like, I was like, this doesn't make us all of a sudden heroes. We weren't heroes. We aren't heroes now.
Yeah.
We're doing a job. And to me, it felt more like during this particular it felt like we were just kind of like victims of circumstance. Yeah. And my other problem with the term hero is that makes us like superhuman, like we're immune to all of the kind of secondary effects of this. So,
which couldn't be further from the truth.
Right. Like we can't have, like we're not supposed to have feelings about it. Right. Suck it up. It's your job. That's what you signed up for. Right. You're a hero. Go be a hero. Right.
Yeah.
So to me, that element of hero being like kind of superhuman or not.
Yeah. You're like, I didn't know
that felt just icky to me.
Yeah. No,
I don't like any of it.
I agree. I'm always like, hero. No, I just do my thing. Just do what I do. And
job I love, a job I really love, which got so hard to do. I mean, I think, one thing I didn't really talk about, which was another part of how difficult things got at the end of the summer and kind of what pushed me toward the decision to go hardcore into therapy and all that stuff, is the conflict that was arising and the infighting between nurses who would be vaxxed and nurses who wouldn't be vaxxed, and the arguments that were happening in the community, on social media,
and social media
workplaces, amongst coworkers.
Yeah.
I think there were some conversations had and damages done that will not be undone. I know people who've lost friendships. I know people who are not speaking to family members. I mean, so that kind of stuff was also particularly stressful for me, because I really thrive on a work environment that is, cohesive and team, and everybody's like together. And this really was starting to drive people apart.
Yeah. It still is. It still is. I mean,
still is.
I posted something in a ER nurse group earlier today about the next variant of COVID coming through, and even in there, even amongst emergency nurses, there's still people who are like, well, vaccination's not everything. Like that's not gonna do it. And you're like going, but the studies are showing that it kind of is. Like the studies are showing no, vaccine is certainly going to be in your favor. And while it may not get you out of the woods, it will probably keep you from dying. And just the amount of people that are just vaccine resistant, you wonder, like, is it just being disagreeable to be disagreeable? Is it just an inherent untrust of the state, the federal government, whatever the case may be? Like, what is the driver for this great distrust that that there's people out there that just don't trust science right now?
I wish I had the answer to that.
Right? You're like, right? It's the $1 million question, right? How many times you see people, well, I've done my research. And you're like, oh, have you? All right. So you've done your research, online, whatever blog that you listen to, whatever, when, everything points to that you are completely wrong. So
I don't think we'll ever get past that, particularly in this country, just because we value our independence so much.
Yep.
So I don't think we're ever going to get past some of that thinking. I mean, for some people, just the simple fact of a mandate telling you what to do makes you immediately defiant. right?
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter because you're saying I have to.
Yep. Then I don't want to.
Right.
Period. Well, if no one was asking, it was just, hey, here's an offer. You'd be like, oh yeah, let's do that. It makes a lot of sense.
So I think that's part of it. But, you know, I don't know.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to see the infighting and the fighting and the adamant, on either side of the aisle. And I think everyone should get vaccinated. I think it's the right thing to do. Like, I hate the idea of mandates. Like the idea of mandates kind of make me like, but the reality is like, we need to do something.
I'm not innocent either of being like very opinionated about it. And, but I ultimately, for me, I tell doctors and my charge nurses this all the time. Like, there are very few times that I get fired up. When I get fired up, it's because I am asking for something for the good of my patient.
Yeah.
And I will fight to the teeth on that.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt about this. And it was so much bigger than just a patient, right? It was all the patients, and it was my entire community, and it was my family, and it was everybody in the world.
Yeah.
I was fired up.
I think in more than any other time since I've been a nurse, and I've been a nurse a little bit longer than you have, I think in all the time I've been a nurse, I don't think I've seen anything that made nurses feel quite as vulnerable as COVID has. Like, we just, there's just so much we didn't know, and so much, to start. And now there's a lot that we know. And there's a lot that we still don't know. And then, these things mutate and come back, and you got, a whole new set of problems. So it's tough. It's a tough time right now to be a nurse.
Extremely difficult. And that's kind of what I try to highlight in, my social media and kind of what I'm putting out there. I try to only put out science-based, good information.
Yep.
And my personal experience and like reality, not like, I don't try to make my reality look, Pinterest perfect, right? Or Instagram influencer perfect. I'm going to throw it out there because, like I said earlier, the more I do it, the more people come back to me and say, same, right? And thank you so much for sharing, because same, right?
It's kind of funny. Oftentimes we need that first person to say yes, or the first person to say, yep, that's me. And then everyone else start just kind of fall in line where you're like, oh yeah, the first person said, oh my gosh, I'm stressed. I'm having a hard time. I'm not coping well. Then everybody else like, me too. I didn't want to say anything.
Yeah.
Like everyone kind of chimes in, right?
Yep. I mean, as soon as I put up my post about finally getting rid of my mask stash, I had, inboxes and texts like, I just did that last week too. And I cried. And, I could cry thinking about it right now, because that box of masks was like a security blanket. It was, and it represented so much. It represented so much fear and anxiety and overwhelming, like horrible. It just was a horrible box full of memories, right?
Yep.
Like every one of those masks was with me through an entire shift. And then I was saving it just in case, right? Like just in case, like just in case what? Well, we were living in pretty dire times, right? I will say, like, nowhere that I worked did they say,
we're
you
good.
can only have one mask a week, or you can only, but everybody was, please practice conservation. Please be conservative with your use of masks, right?
Yep.
So, and I was fit for one type of mask. Eventually that mask was no longer being produced and no one had them anymore. So we had to be refitted for different kinds of masks that I felt didn't fit as well. But I fit tested for. I never felt unsafe, but I did not I think we all felt unsafe for using masks. That's here or there. I think everybody
That's
had
true.
to do that, but,
To some degree.
But that big box of feelings and fear and whatever has been sitting in my garage for as long as the pandemic, essentially. So, and my husband kept asking me, please, can I throw this out now? And to his credit,
What if I need it? You're like, what if I need it?
What if I need it? A, yeah. And B, I was not ready. And to his credit, every time I said, I'm not ready, he said, okay.
All right. Let me know when you are.
Yep. And finally, a couple of weeks ago, he said, can we throw this away? And I said, yeah, let's do it.
Like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get rid of this thing.
And he said, okay, I'll put it on my to-do list today. And I said, okay. And I was making the kids breakfast and I was standing in the kitchen and I started to get very, very anxious.
You're like, wait, he's going to throw those away?
I haven't felt that way since before I started medication. There were tears in my eyes. I was starting to get short of breath. It's happening to me right now. You can see me. Like, I know you can see me. I had so many feelings about it. And I'm standing there in my kitchen and I'm like, okay, I think I have to throw them away. So I said, let that be on my to-do list today. Yeah. I'm going to do it. He goes, I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
And then because I had so many feelings about it, I thought I should do a video of it. And originally I was just going to send it to like my little text group. And then I thought, I've been sharing all kinds of stuff. Why don't I share this too? Because I cannot be the only one who feels this way. Yeah. Because as I've learned, as I share, I keep saying, whenever I share, someone says me too. So, and I think it's so, I think the first time I heard someone tell me, agree with me and say, me too, I'm going through it too. It helped me so much to not feel alone, that sharing to me was more important than whatever, my pride or my ugly cry or whatever, it just if I can help one single nurse who feels the same way or who has the same feelings, it's worth it to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's one thing I want to just, credit you for and congratulate you for is just your candidness and how open and you're sharing and you're saying, hey, look, no one else will say it. I'll say it. I'm struggling. I'm having a tough time. And I think there's a lot of nurses that are in that spot. And it takes a lot of guts because then, you realize too, you look around, you see these nurses, and you're like, well, she's having a hard time. Well, then it's okay that I'm having a hard time because she's got her shit together and she's a great nurse and she's having a tough time. Then I can too. And so many people were in that boat where they were like, so many people, like great people I know, struggling.
Well, and we're not good at this. We're not good at this. Like like we said it earlier, we're ER nurses. We are so good at compartmentalizing and boxing those things up. And we have to, and that's by design. We have to, because we have to.
Because if you couldn't do that, you would really have a tough time functioning in the EC after about a month.
You've got to be able to experience that trauma, the death, the mangled, whatever. Yeah. You have to do that and then walk into your next patient's room. Yeah. 5 minutes later. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I remember telling people is that like, you don't realize that like typically if you have an ER nurse who's looking after you, you're seeing maybe 1/5 of their workload, probably less than that. Maybe, they may have a bigger workload than that, but you're not seeing much of their workload. And there's a lot of stuff that they're doing that when they're not with you, they're doing something else. So,
I mean, you have to pack that stuff up, right? You have to be able to be able to make your shift, but we also need to learn to unpack that stuff. And we're not good at that.
If you don't, shit will come out sideways. Like a lot of either unhealthy coping mechanisms or sometimes worse. So
with you, it will catch up to you. Yeah. And we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves.
For sure. Yeah, 100%.
traumatized people and we need to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. What advice would you give to a nurse who's feeling the same way you're doing, feeling the same way you either are or were or somewhere in between?
I would say, for sure, consider therapy. And if you have EAP at your hospital, look into that.
Yeah.
I know some people think therapy's not for them or they can't afford it or whatever that is. Find your people. Like, you must have at least one coworker who you can talk to. Another, someone you go to for advice constantly.
Yeah.
Talk to them. I think for me, a lot of, and this won't be true for everybody, but for me, having something to label, like say, oh, this is me anxious. Yeah. Oh, it's this. Well, now that I know it's that, I can handle that. I can anxiety. Okay. Anxiety. Got it. Okay. Like depression. Got it. Like,
yeah, it's true.
It's funny. Like sometimes I have to talk things out and we'll come to a conclusion with a friend or my mom or whoever. And you go, oh, sometimes naming it is just enough.
Powerful.
Because
it's powerful to be able to say, here's what it is. Like, I'm not crazy. Like, it's not just, we're all in like terrible situations in a lot of ways. And I say that, but and some are terrible and some are, just struggling and getting by, but we're going to do so. And it's like, man, ain't nobody getting out of this thing unscathed. That's for sure.
I'd say find your outlets, like find your, during some of my deepest times, my deepest, toughest times, I would take hikes with my dog. I've taken hikes where I'm crying for part of them, singing for part of them, just breathing, talking to a friend, whatever. I like to be outside. I like to walk. I like nature. If you like to, I don't know, skateboard or
whatever it is you do,
or
you got to find an outlet. You got to find an outlet and a place to physical activity like helps kind of.
I think, yes, there's something about, in particular, a physical activity, I think that is really helpful for stress relief. I know everyone else, it's exercise. Okay. That doesn't mean you have to like go do an hour long, like super hard workout. Like you could literally just like walk around the block.
Yeah. That's exercise. That counts.
Stretch.
That counts too. Yeah.
Or something that moves your body that makes you feel good. That doesn't mean you have to like go do CrossFit. That's not for everybody. So do something you like. So choose something you like and find an outlet where you can kind of clear your head, cry, listen to Art of Emergency Nursing on your iPad or whatever, iPad on your, what are those things called? iPhone. Jesus. Earpods, whatever. I think that's what I was going for, the earpods. Lord.
One thing when this was kind of first going on and I was meeting with folks and talking about COVID and having these conversations and just having conversations, a lot of people, what I found is a lot of nurses reached out to me who said that they felt isolated, and they said that they felt like they were isolated. They felt like they were alone. They felt like they were in this by themselves. And I kept trying to remind them all that you are not in this by yourself at all. There's people all over the globe who are having the same problems you're having. And I don't know how many times people would reach out and be like, this made me feel like, it made me realize I'm not alone. Like, I'm hearing so-and-so say this is what they're feeling, and I'm feeling the same thing. And there's a lot of power in that. So I think that's been an incredible benefit of the podcast for me, is to get that kind of feedback and hopefully offer something to people who are having a tough time.
Yeah.
So
I also think, like, I was just thinking about the book the other day, the ER Nurses book.
Yeah.
I got it and started reading it. And the more I read it, I mean, it's fun because I know some of the people and whatever. But the more I read it, the more I realized, like, the book's not really for us, right? Like,
Yeah.
But it would be a really great gift for like, I think it's a great gift for like a nurse lover, like, like you're for my partner or for a parent or somebody who you think could understand you better. I think it would be an excellent thing to pass to them to like help them understand a bit of what your job is like so that they perhaps have a little more empathy for you. And it might open like better communication, I think, with them to sort of say, hey, are you doing okay? Or how's,
Because not always are our spouses going to be understanding that you want to come home and you just don't want to talk. And like, you can't. You're like, I can't do this right now. I can't have a conversation. I can't, we're going to argue if I open my mouth. So I'm just going to say, I love you. I'll talk to you in a little bit and just decompress and do what you need to do and be who you need to be. And sometimes that's hard for them to see. But sometimes it's hard for us to just kind of realize like, hey, I'm not in a good place right now. Like I need a minute. So,
a minute, and I can't even tell you about it because I'll ruin your day.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that. It's like,
it's kind of funny. My wife read just a little bit of the book. She wasn't interested, and she's like, I can't. I don't want to. And I get it. Like, because there's some really great funny stories in there, but then there's like some real tragic stories there where you're like, oh my God. And she read one of the more sad stories. She's like, have you ever had to deal with something like this? And I was like, yeah, exactly the way it sounds right there. And she's like, well, you never told me about that. And I'm like, well, I can't. Yeah. Like, what am I supposed to say? Come on and be like, hey, I'm feeling really depressed and sad because this is what happened. Let me fuck up your day too. By telling you all about it when you're not as equipped as I am to deal with this. And I'm having a hard time. I went through a phase for a minute when we had a particularly bad trauma that I'll never forget. I still see this guy's face as clear as day. And for a while after that, and I usually don't have a hard time sleeping. I can sleep anywhere, anytime, anyhow. And I went through a bout of insomnia where I was like up at night and I was just like struggling and not doing well. And my wife was like, well, what's wrong? I'm like, I just got too much on my mind and I couldn't verbalize it or didn't verbalize it. When maybe I was going through kind of a tough time and dealing with something that I was still processing. But the problem is like, if you don't talk to somebody about that, whether it be your spouse or, counselor or your peers or something, you don't talk to somebody about that shit just builds up and just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, that's, and that's the advertisement for therapy or whatever else. Actually, you know what else? If your hospital has chaplains, which I don't think I've been to a hospital now that doesn't, they are also wonderful to talk to.
Great.
And will absolutely talk to you about anything you're struggling with.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
So there's that as well if you're, and they're free. So, but that's definitely the argument for therapy, because there are things that you don't want to share with your family members or, they won't understand, or like you said, will traumatize them as well. So,
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the last questions I ask all my guests is a question called 3 things. So what are 3 things an ER nurse should always remember? And what are 3 things they just need to forget?
Okay. I thought about this a little bit. So this is a little bit cliche, but I will say that you cannot take care of others well unless you take care of yourself.
Ain't that the truth?
And that includes your mental health. Number 2, we already touched on this, but I was going to make sure that I mentioned that most employers have an EAP program, and you should start there if you're struggling at all. And then my 3rd one is something I say to every new grad and every experienced nurse, which is always ask questions. I don't care if you think if it's a dumb question. I don't care if you need to clarify something with the doctor. I don't care if you think you're going to piss the doctor off. Go ask your question. Absolutely. Because you never know what you're going to uncover. I have asked doctors, what is this medication about? And they're like, oh my God, I did not mean to order it for that patient. This is supposed to be for this other patient. And you're like, okay.
You're like, okay.
So, yeah. So just, it doesn't matter who it is, what it is. Get used to feeling dumb. It's fine. I do it all the time. Ask questions if you have them, period. Always.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's one of those things you just have to, like, you just have to ask the question.
Yep.
So,
and someone will come to me and say, okay, this is a dumb question, but I said, nope, no such thing. Some days I just can't retrieve from that part of my brain. I'm going to have to ask a question that I know I should know the answer to. It's okay. We can't, we're not robots.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%. So,
and forget all the haters who say, oh, if you have feelings, you weren't cut out for this job. Or, if you can. Okay. I would argue the opposite.
Yeah.
I would say that if you have lost all your feelings and you can't stand there and cry with someone who has just lost somebody, that maybe you need to reconsider your career path.
Oh my God. I couldn't agree more.
Get therapy, one or the other, because something's broken in you.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. You are allowed to cry with family members. You are allowed to grieve. Mm-hmm. You are allowed to take 5 in a back stairwell or whatever secret bathroom you have on your unit or whatever that place is, and cry or feel or stomp or scream or whatever you have to do. You're allowed to do that and have your feelings and then go back to your work. You don't have to stuff everything in the box immediately.
Yeah. Yep.
And on that note, forget that there's no crying in the ER. There is crying in the ER. I have done it. I will continue to do it. And I don't care what anybody says.
I told you I'm a sympathetic crier. If you start crying, I'll start crying.
You want to come cry? Come cry to me. I'll give you a big hug.
There you go.
And forget guilt over calling in sick. Forget guilt over saying no to overtime. Forget guilt over leaving at your scheduled time to leave when there's no one to replace you.
Yeah.
I don't care. Patient care moves on. The hospital will still be there. The work will still be there. You are replaceable. If you were gone, they'd replace you tomorrow.
Yep.
You are irreplaceable to your family.
Absolutely right.
And you're irreplaceable to yourself. So take care of yourself and take care of your family. Have healthy boundaries. Don't do overtime.
Yeah. I remember talking to a nurse not that long ago, and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so burnt out. And I go, how many hours a week are you working? She's like, 50. And I'm like, well, that's a good first step is let's get it back down to what you're supposed to be working. Or, what is a healthy amount of work like that? And I understand that there's seasons of that. And there are seasons where you work a lot and seasons where you have to pick up and this and that. But the reality is like you said, I remember that one of the first jobs I left where I thought, oh my God, they're never going to be able to replace me. And I remember I actually uttered those words to somebody and I said, what are they going to do without me? This place is going to fall apart when I'm not there. And the reality is you're like, oh, for God's sakes, like they didn't even notice I was gone. Like, okay, they maybe did, but not to a degree that like was detrimental. Like I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, when I leave this place is going to fall apart. And you know what? It didn't. You know what? And when the person that replaced me, when they left, it didn't fall apart when they left either. So. Yep.
And I themed my 3 things geared toward mental health this time.
Yeah.
I have many, many things, but those are my 3 for today's discussion.
Those are a good 3. Those are a good 3. Well, where can people find you online and find these cool shirts that you do and all the cool stuff that you do?
Yeah. So Best Coast sounds like West Coast, but we're the Best Coast. So bestcoastrn.com is my website. I have an Etsy shop, Best Coast RN, and you can email me at bestcoastrn@gmail.com or find me on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. You can message me there. That's where I am.
Awesome.
Oh, I have Instagram too. You can find me at Best Coast RN.
There you go.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to me tonight. I really appreciate it.
I had so much fun. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So much fun.
Enjoyed bearing my soul a little bit, and I hope that it helps other nurses, and I hope that it makes them feel more comfortable with their feelings and response to the pandemic in general, but also to our job in general.
Yeah, our job's hard anyway.
We have a hard job
not. No.
Yeah, I mean, COVID really brought out the worst, I think, worst in all of us, but I think we have a hard job as it is and need to unpack our stuff more than we realized. And I think COVID's just kind of what brought it to a head, sort of pushed a lot of us to the brink.
Agreed.
So I really, really hope that if you feel how I was feeling, or if you're feeling really lost, or you're feeling like you are so burnt out and you can't take care of your patients, I hope that you do some soul searching and maybe some therapy, or maybe some kickboxing and running, or whatever you have to do to get yourself in a better headspace so that you can take care of your patients.
Absolutely.
It's made a huge difference for me. And I'm now able to be present for my patients and really see them for who they are. And I think I'm a better nurse for it.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so proud of you. And thank you so much for taking the time to share with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
This has been a lot of fun.
It has been.
Thanks for listening to the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Facebook.